it not working for me, although I thought it would in my test previously. Apologies. It is definitely a Monday, Kendra. You're exactly right. I hope everyone is doing well today. All right, thanks for being here today. This is the first meeting of the Recycling Work Group Subgroup 1 meeting. Per our kickoff call, we sort of decided to split up into two subgroups to focus on different aspects of recycling here in Nevada. So to that end, thank you all for being here. And I have sort of a very brief Word document kind of outlining some bullet points that we can discuss. And obviously, please chime in and let's make this a real active conversation if that's all right. Okay.
Good.
Well, I'm going to try to share my screen then, and I think that's it. And let's see if I can find the Word document. Oh, for heaven's sake. Well, I really am not this technologically challenged all the time. Well, it's not letting me share my screen with what I'm doing right now, but essentially this sub-work group or recycling subgroup was intended to create recommendations for the state solid waste management plan. Does everybody have a copy of that, or have you been able to review it?
This is Alexia. If we could resend that, that would be helpful. I don't think I've seen it.
Okay, perfect. We can definitely resend that out. My screen is frozen. Thank you, Wes. I'm going to turn video off. And hopefully that will help. So the state will definitely resend the state solid waste management plan. Thank you, Wes. It looks like that may be the case. So our thinking is the best way to achieve some of these goals is to work through the existing frameworks that we have, such as the State Solid Waste Management Plan, the NRS, or the NAC. So we suggested some items to focus on that could be captured in that State Solid Waste Management Plan. And these also address the majority of the comments from the survey sent out this summer. It seems like it's going to be pretty tough to address everything everybody wants to do right now. There's a lot of really great ideas out there that may be best served in a phase 2, but focusing right now on the existing infrastructure that we have in Nevada, the existing pathways that we have, and trying to increase the amount of recycling to start with of the baseline recyclables, I think would be super important. And if people have a strong disagreement around that, we should discuss it. But when Wes and I met, that was sort of the idea that seemed to bubble up the most. And I didn't really hear much discussion on that the first time around, but any thoughts on that?
This is Patty. That sounds good to me. I think, you know, just starting with where we are and adding things later. But yeah, we got to get a handle on what you know, the regular recyclables first, I think, before we start looking at special items.
Yeah, thank you, Patty.
My concerns, and this is Wes, by the way, that I know Jessica and I talked about, was trying to, it would be fantastic to deal with everything all at once, but I don't think that's actually a realistic goal, especially coming from the regulatory side. And I think that that's why the focus of trying to make sure that we create a better solution for what we already have in play. And then we do like what we were just discussing, is add those other components on, or at least set the stage to be able to add into the system the other components, and it helps industry and regulation work together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wes. Any further discussion on that concept? So we're all kind of agreed to focus on the baseline recyclables right now and use the existing infrastructure and pathways, as well as the mechanisms like the state solid waste management plan.
This is Alexia. I agree with the idea and with the path forward. I think it might be worthwhile, to discuss potential language, included in whatever we come up with that leaves the door open to add these extra or external things in the future.
I like that idea a lot. I definitely thought the document that came out last Friday, I think that you sent, regarding the recycling, I'm going to paraphrase this badly, the recycling of the solar infrastructure. I think that's a wonderful idea, but I think that's, again, sort of a future project that we don't really have the ability to capture right now. And I was unclear exactly what they were looking for. And I did quite a bit of searching and tried to read the bill, and I couldn't really find any real guidance or ideas on that. So it seemed like this would be best to focus on the baselines right now.
Sure. Just, my thinking behind sending that, this is Alexia again, was more, calling attention to the federal government, setting funds aside for work like this, or for work like, sustainable electricity, or a combination of the two. Because I know some of the language sort of, alluded to waste management and recycling and using recyclables as potential sources of creating clean energy. So I felt like that was a stretch too, but I thought it was interesting and worth noting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the kind of thing where maybe we could start a online repository of information, like a Google Drive or something like that, where when we have these documents, we don't have to search through 2 months worth of email to find them. And I don't know, Brianna, if that's something that NDEP might be able to facilitate.
Yeah, we've got one going for the source reduction group. I can set you guys up with one as well.
I think that'd be wonderful. All right. Well, if there's not much additional discussion kind of around the guidelines or sort of bumper rails for this group, then we could kind of launch into some of the ideas for working within the framework we've discussed. And one of the top items that I keep hearing about, and we hear about a lot, I think, in the community, the state community around recycling, is how do we increase the baseline recycling at the multifamily dwellings, apartment complexes or condos or things like that? And the hub and spoke model, by the way, that's the group that's looking at how to tackle recycling in the rural or more remote communities. So if you're really interested in the rurals, please let me know and jump on that group as well. But in this case, we're focused on recycling at multifamily dwellings and how do we increase those baseline recyclables coming out. So just some initial ideas that I had were, and I think Wes and I talked about both of these, are, some of the hurdles, including codes, space availability, parking spaces, not just getting people on board with it, but there are some real structural hurdles around this. And then certainly some advantages, such as increasing those baseline recyclables coming into various facilities, OCC, used beverage containers, things of that nature that are kind of that baseline recyclable. So I think those would be some of the advantages. There's also some sort of more fuzzy advantages, such as reaching out to a wider community to make them aware of how important sustainability is and that their actions do have consequences for the positive if they can take those steps. So I think writing some language that could go into the state solid waste management plan that would then be a stepping stone for local communities or counties to adopt would go a long way in increasing this recycling at multifamily dwellings. But what do people think about this? Is this something we should focus on? And are these things that are possible, or is this just one of those really, really tough to do types of things?
I had some thoughts on this, and I did some work. I was in energy efficiency, but in Boulder, Colorado, and was looking at some of the outreach and engagement they had done within their community for multifamily dwellings. And a lot of that type of work sees its highest impact with one-on-one engagement. So I know that there's hurdles with codes and space availability and more technical issues, but I am a proponent for doing like more face-to-face, one building at a time type of work. I know that maybe sort of falls into education, but you know, it would require the coordination and planning of a large group to kind of figure out how that type of thing might be done. So I did find a report that was done, I think in 2016, that involved kind of a pilot program with a few different apartment buildings that involved, you know, speaking to all the tenants, working directly with property managers, and kind of seeing what the cost and impact of that effort was. So I don't know if it'd be beneficial, but I can send that to the group if that's something that we want to talk about for this, this effort.
I think that'd be tremendous to see that. If you could share that, I think that'd be great.
Okay.
I do think, and Wes, I see your hand up, but I do think that we have to have, in order for those one-on-one engagements to be most beneficial, I think having a framework or a structure encouraging or incentivizing the apartments to do that would be helpful. Because if there are codes that they're going to come up against or some kind of barrier, then they're going to have to overcome that, and that might be really challenging. Wes, what are your thoughts?
I like both of those ideas. I think they're great. I know Mark Cameron's on the call too, and I can speak to. And so we contract with Keep Truckee Meadows Beautiful to be able to help and aid in doing those tasks, and this would fall into some of that, and it would require a lot of coordination and group. At the same time, you know, everything that Jessica is saying is pertinent and important because each city, agency, county has different regulatory code, and that becomes very difficult to navigate in order to allow some of the apartments to be able to take up the space to do these things. And then additionally, we would have to work with whatever the local collection agency was to ensure that they were capable of doing this. And so it comes into a stepped approach, which is why I think the best avenue for moving forward would be to create it into the solid waste management plan, which then lends credence and weight to the regulatory agencies having to work together to try and find some common pathways. I think those are the biggest challenges that I think exist, is to get those common pathways so that we can meet a regional goal.
This is Alexia. I don't see anybody else's hand raised, so I'll just jump into kind of to go off of what Wes was just saying. But the opposite side of that, and I don't know if this is jumping too far ahead, but is there any talk or thought about like the producers of these materials, you know, like waste pricing or recyclables pricing or something to help pay for these things? Because I think you can't pass the cost on to necessarily to multifamily units and the people that live in them, because somebody has to pay for it. Is that a discussion that's worth having?
Yeah, I think
at
that's
this
an
point?
important discussion. Yeah, so I think maybe what you were touching on is rebates. And I think that's going to be a pretty challenging thing to implement from a collection standpoint or a recycler standpoint. So if is that what you mean, is kind of like a rebate? So if you send 2 tons of recyclables and it's worth X amount of money, you get X% of it?
That I mean, I think that's been going on for a really long time. But sort of at the beginning of the manufacturers, right? Like carbon pricing, but for recycling or for recyclable materials or something.
Yeah, I think
So
that's
from
going
the
to be
source.
much bigger than what we can do in Nevada, because those are the, you know, like the peanut butter jar is made by somebody, I don't even know where, but how do we, as Nevada, force them to give us a fraction of a penny to get it, make sure it's recycled? That might be in that extended producer responsibility work, not so much in this.
Okay.
But I don't know what other people think. Am I missing the point on that? Yes, Patty.
So I had a couple thoughts. For paying, I think, I mean, it's not really a state mandate or, you know, something the state can control, but getting some of the franchise fees to actually pay for recycling programs. So that's more like, you know, at the municipal level. So that's kind of an issue that may have to be solved by the counties or the city. But a couple things I was thinking about was, you know, we were talking about doing outreach, is if we can maybe work with someone like KTMB to do recycling ambassador program, so that can, you know, so that when you go to a multifamily complex, that you can actually recruit some of the residents to help educate other residents. And they've done that, you know, in some other communities. So that's one idea we could kind of work on. And I guess my question for Wes was, would that, you're talking about like in the state waste management plan, because the counties also have to do their waste management plans. And so do we, you know, we need to work, I guess, at both levels to find common solutions that way, you know, so it mentions it in the state plan, but also in the county plans as well.
Yeah, this is Wes. Patty, to answer your question, yes, I think that would be the strongest foot forward for something like this. And one of my thoughts, to circle back to one of your comments, would be, how do we pay for this? I don't think that there's a method that's going to allow anybody to truly just pay for it so that it becomes a free service to multifamily dwellings. I don't think that's going to be realistic. And I agree with Jessica in the state of Nevada, we don't have the existing taxes to support that. But one of the things that Patty had brought up, and I know that I had mentioned, or that I've talked about as well, is we can tie recycling goals to the franchise agreements. And we can do that through at the state level and basically target some goals there that would incentivize those franchise agreements working towards creating some recycling goals. And I think that would be one way to provide at least some type of assistance or some structure in moving a plan like this forward.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't thinking that it would pay for for the total program, but maybe paper part of it and maybe just the educational part, and having, price structures so that the recycling bins are, having recycling bins is cheaper than having waste bins, and working with the pickup of the, how often you're picking up the waste and that kind of thing to make it, and, to incentivize it for the complex.
One of the things with pricing the bins is that sometimes if you price recycling lower than trash, you increase your contamination rate significantly because people just put everything in the recycle bin rather than paying for more trash pickup. So that's one of those weird little things that does have some unintended consequences, but we can certainly talk through that stuff. Mark Cameron, you had your hand up.
Sure. Yeah. Since KTMB's name is getting thrown out there a lot, I figured I better speak. I better chime in. Well, I guess one of the questions for me is, we're talking about creating this pathway, but it's kind of the chicken or the egg to me. It's like, do we need to figure out what the pathway is and then utilize KTMB as a means to get the word out, or do we need to use KTMB to get the word out to create a demand? I mean, which needs to come first? And I don't know the answer to this question. It's kind of rhetorical, but is the pathway, creating the pathway or creating the demand for it first?
I think, in my opinion, it seems like the demand is somewhat there, but we have to have a regulatory pathway in order to increase the demand. In order to allow that demand to get kind of excited and increased through work from you guys or other groups, if there are regulatory hurdles or other blockages, we're not going to be able to achieve this no matter how excited or how much work people put into it. So it's definitely a chicken or the egg kind of question. Right. Or circular, but that's just sort of how I see it. And maybe I just live and die too much in the regulations, but that's my perspective.
Right. Well, that's kind of where I was headed to, is that we need to get people excited about it so that they're talking to the right people and that we're showing that there's demand so that we can push the other piece through. Because we have this discussion internally at KTMB a lot, and I know we've heard from folks, and we're in the process right now of doing some surveying of different communities, and one of the targets for us is to figure out in the multifamily dwelling units, if there is a demand. So it's kind of one of those questions we're starting to ask now. So I guess what I'm thinking is that information, if we can show that there's a demand, then maybe it'll help to create a better pathway.
Right. And I think too, there are going to be different demands based on socioeconomic demographics in different, multifamily dwellings, because not all multifamily dwellings are the same. So, as we start getting into this, it can definitely get a little granular. I think we had, not to cut you off, but I think we had Kendra, and I saw Rick raise your hand physically. Did you guys want to say something?
This is Rick McEwen. Do the existing contracts that are for solid waste in Clark County, where the population, of course, is the greatest for the state, is that something we need to understand as well, how we can function within how that operates?
Yeah, I think that was something that other folks have sort of touched on, is the franchise agreements and tying a recycling goal into those franchise agreements. In Clark County, for example, Republic has the franchise for solid waste, but recycling is still somewhat open. So there could be mechanisms to change that to try to increase recycling, and not necessarily tie it to Republic, but tie it to achieving the numbers and of whatever the goal is from the county and the state.
Okay, that sounds very plausible.
Yeah, and I mean, we'd have to work with the county managers and folks like that, the county franchise managers, as well as we have 4 franchise agreements. There's Clark County, City of Henderson, City of Las Vegas, and City of North Las Vegas. So all 4 of those agreements would have to be tied to whatever goal is out there. But I think I like doing this from a sort of a top-down approach. If Nevada has a goal and then Clark County sets a goal, then all 4 of those franchise agreements could be amended, and they're being amended to be the same exact thing, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think that's a good approach.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kendra.
Jessica, you stole some of the words right out of my mouth earlier on that. No, I mean, in a good way, we're on the same page, and the people using their recycling container as a trash container when they're priced lower. So I agree with what track we're on with sort of franchising, taking into account that all franchise agreements are unique and precious. One of the things that we might want to look at as we're bringing the franchise into it, though, up here in Northern Nevada, we do it as a single rate. That recycling container residentially is part of your rate. And we do make those recycling containers cheaper for commercial, but we don't require anyone to get recycling up here. So it's available, and it's available for cheaper, but it's not a required thing. If we wanted to use it to meet a goal, we might consider some requirements as well.
That makes sense, yeah.
Kendra?
Go ahead, Mark.
This is Mark. I have a question. What is the participation? Like you said, it's not mandatory that people take that recycling bin. I have one. Up and down my street, almost everybody has one, but I'm wondering, what is the participation rate for single family, against the percentage of folks that have the waste container? Do you know that?
I don't know the exact number off the top, but it's pretty high. It's like in the 80s. So most people do it, but to Jessica's point, not everybody uses it the right way.
Right. But I guess would it be too much of a stretch to say that if the participation rate is 80% in single family, that we couldn't just extrapolate that multifamily would be as high, or whether it's done correctly or not?
No, they don't relate in any way, because a single family has control over their waste disposal, right up to the point where they put it out the curb. But for commercial customers, they don't have any control over those bins and how people in their building are using them. And people can be very careless when they don't have to pay the bill. And so they end up contaminating at a high rate. That results in fees that make that recycling container as expensive or more expensive as the same size trash container. And eventually some of those property owners will give up and only provide waste instead of recycling.
All right. Well,
It
would be interesting to know if there's anybody out there that has a model that's working in multifamily to that point for commercial.
I think we, as the big waste companies, could look around and maybe reach out to some colleagues and find out if there is a working model. One question that I've wondered about is, would it make sense, rather than have a bin behind every multifamily dwelling, but to have more convenience centers out in the community where, whether you have single family or multifamily, if you want to recycle, if you didn't have to go to one of 2 transfer stations in Clark County, could you go to more locations, and would that drive up the rates of recycling? And that would be a bypass potentially around some of the codes issues with putting a recycle bin behind every single apartment complex. There are definitely hurdles to that one, but it seemed like that might be something we consider, rather than just being focused on a bin behind every apartment complex. And
So I'll just jump in and
please
say that we do a program, like you said, the transfer station drop off for free for customers who live in a multi-family complex who don't have that option where they live. And even though it's close to our property and we theoretically have eyes on it, people still will put trash in it. So So I would be a little bit concerned about those bins becoming an attractive nuisance elsewhere in the community and who would have ownership over it. Not saying we can't do it. But as far as increasing rates in multifamily, and I hate to say this because it's the C word, but California has regulations for that, and maybe they have some ideas we can steal from there.
I had some thoughts too, just to piggyback off of that specific point, is that I don't know of really any region that has successfully increased their recycling rate without increasing the requirements for recycling. For waste management, there's only so much we can do in getting people to recycle, but the fact of the matter is that people are going to do whatever is easiest and most convenient, and if we require them to do it, they're probably gonna be upset about it at first, and there'll be some contamination, but then eventually people will adjust. So in my mind, the way that a lot of these programs works is that requirements are increased, and then the role of private companies and supporting nonprofits is to help ease the pain of that transition. So I think, if we want to make a big impact, we're really going to have to push for policy, and I'm not sure, what our role is in doing that as far as this working group goes.
Well, I think we're going to work closely. These recommendations for the solid waste management plan will be submitted to both NDEP and the policy working group. So we do have an opportunity with this to affect policy and make these recommendations or suggestions. So hopefully, that puts to rest some ideas there. I do see that Patty mentioned limiting access to recycling bins may be an option, and I think that could be one of the structural things we should consider if we're going to consider addition, and maybe it's a blend of additional drop-off locations that are quasi-manned or limited with access, and where possible, recycling bins behind apartment complexes, but without an overarching sort of state goal or state plan, it's going to be hard to implement either of those things and incentivize either of those things to come forward. Alexia and Phoebe, I think you guys had your hands up.
Yeah, this is Alexia. So a couple of things. I am a business owner, and obviously I have my own private residence, and I pay for trash service from Waste Management. And I live in a rural community, and there are multifamily dwellings in the community that I live in. And there's also a transfer station in the community that I live in Virginia City. And there's no offer of recycling at all. And a lot of the people that live in rural communities, choose, instead of having trash cans, choose to, take their trash to the dump once a week or to a transfer station. So I think that should just be added as a layer, to be acknowledged in this for multifamilies or single dwellings or businesses. Speaking as a business owner, I own a restaurant. It is incredibly hard to get recycling done, both from my employees and from the customers. I don't really have a solution to that. I guess I'm just kind of agreeing with that more than anything, which I think is worth talking about for sure.
Yeah.
And then, I'm on the policy group, and I'm not a big fan of forcing people to do things that they don't like. And living in a rural community, that's a really hard thing to do. But if the goal of this group is to effectively increase recycling and decrease, landfill, that's something that I think is definitely worth considering. And we should have a good, detailed conversation about that. And I do think that California is a good role model, whether we like them or not.
Yeah, I like your point about having a recycle bin at the transfer station. We don't have one at the Cheyenne transfer station, which is the biggest one of the biggest ones in the country, but we don't have a recycle bin there because we don't really have the space for it. However, we could get creative if there was an incentive to do so. And I think that's what we're looking for, are these kind of incentives. And I don't want to step on anyone. I do realize that, you know, we're having a great conversation around this. We did have a few other items that we could discuss. What would be the mechanism from this group to work on some of these ideas and try to flesh them out? I obviously am trying to take some notes as we talk. They're not necessarily very good notes, and apologies for my bad typing. But do people want to kind of tackle this in their free time and maybe submit some ideas or thoughts and we can regroup on this? Or should we continue the conversation and then tackle some of these other items down here at the bottom in a further conversation?
This is Lexi again. I don't remember who said it, but someone asked the question, you know, what are other people doing? I think that if we spent a little time looking at recycling models in other states and how the counties in those states interact with the regulation, that would probably be a very useful thing for all of us to do.
Agreed.
I love it.
Or maybe even reach out to some of the people, you know, personally in those states too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is reaching out to other stakeholders, which could be agencies or, for example, internal contacts at the companies or groups we all work with. Like, is there a Keep, I don't know, Sacramento Beautiful group that you could reach out to, Mark, or I could certainly reach out to my Republic colleagues.
Yeah, there's it's a Keep America Beautiful affiliation. There's groups like ours all across the country. So I could you know, do some outreach there.
Okay. Do we think everybody should try to take a stab at that, given time and resources, and we can all kind of come together about what we've found? Yes, Patty.
So the Recycling Partnership has a state leaders group. And so I think that there has, you know, some people have done quite a bit of checking into what other states have been doing. And so I guess maybe what I would like is like a kind of more specific. So we want to know what the regulations relating to multifamily, because I can just like ask the group and kind of maybe get a more, you know, we don't all have to research all 50 states, because we've also done some stuff with some intern help in the past few years on looking at what other kind of states regulation and that kind of thing. I mean, there is a lot of action going on at the state level regarding all kinds of recycling things. So that's something, you know, I am a member of the state leaders group. So I can kind of maybe just check with some of my colleagues that way. And so we don't all have to, you know, repeat everything.
I love it. Yeah, and
I think
we
that's
can reach
great.
out. Yeah.
But, oh, yes, I didn't mean to step on you.
I mean, of course, the one problem that we have is that all recycling in Nevada is basically voluntary. And so, you know, maybe that is one thing the policy group is probably looking at, is like, how can we make some of this more, you know, mandatory or have some kind of repercussions? Because really, you know, there's nothing, if whoever is supposed to do something doesn't, there's nothing that's going to happen, you know. So we don't have any repercussions like California. If they don't meet their goals, there's things that happen. And so there's none of that in our policy, in our state regs at this time. And I mean, guess the other thing is like the goal. Okay, our state goal is 25%, which it has been since 1992 or whatever. And again, if we don't meet the goal, there's no repercussions. But we've also only met the goal like 3 times since then. So, so you know, do we raise the rate? Our goal first, kind of the chicken or the egg there too. Do we raise the goal or do we try to reach the goal? You know.
Well, and the goal is, that's one thing we wanted to talk about with the retract data management, is I think that we could reach the goal without, or get closer to the goal if we improve our data management. You can't manage what you can't measure, right? So that's a separate question, but I think needing a specific ask is a fair question to you and to other people that might be doing some research with their colleagues or on the internet or reaching out to direct stakeholders. So to me, the specific asks would be, are there, and somebody chime in, but you know, are there regulatory policies or programs in place addressing multifamily? What are the successes or failures you see? Those would be sort of the high level questions I have at the moment. Did I lose everyone?
No, we're here.
This is
Okay.
Wes. I would tag on to that and ask, like, are they done at the local level or are they done at the state level? Because that is really going to dictate how things are progressed through.
And what are the how do they enforce it, I guess?
I can't type.
And
Yes.
pay for it.
Yeah.
I really can spell, I promise.
You're doing fine. It's always harder under pressure.
You know, I was the state spelling bee champion in New Mexico at one point in time. You think I could do this? So, and how to pay for it. I'll just say funding mechanisms. Okay, I'll shoot this out to the group in maybe a slightly better worded way. And unless there are other comments, I think this is a really good start to getting together some data to talk further about.
This is Alexia again, real quick. And I'm sure there are some others in this group that are on the policy working group. But I just wanted to say for you know, cross communication, I think right now the policy group is working on defining sustainability, which I don't think is a small task. You know, and of course, recycling is definitely part of sustainability. But you know, so in terms of policy, and if we're going to be calling stakeholders and asking them questions, maybe we can ask them to direct us to their policy too, so we can read the actual verbiage in it.
Right.
And maybe there are good definitions for sustainability in, you know, others' policies as well.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
You know, if I can add on to that thought, we might even consider defining what we mean by recycling, because it's a word that we use a lot to talk about composting, or as we mentioned earlier, recycling solar panels, that they don't really get treated the same way as say our single stream recycling does.
Right. One of the biggest issues that I'm you know, hopefully going to have some input on is lithium recycling, right? Recycling batteries. That's a huge issue, especially as we move more into an electrified, you know, world. And currently the regulations and policies regarding transportation and recycling of lithium are incredibly prohibitive.
They
you know,
are.
so that's
Yeah.
part of the conversation. And everyone has them.
That's true. And they're not easy to recycle. If you want to recycle lithium batteries, you need to, you know, usually send off for a box from someone or take it somewhere special. And is it even done here in the States or exactly? So,
and they all like the regulations currently for that is that they go to the landfill. So,
and yeah, and we can talk offline about all of that. I have lots of ideas around that.
oh, good. I would love to.
Yeah, hit me up anytime. So I think fair point. Maybe this is some homework here. This to-do section is, what do we mean by recycling? And I think that's what I was trying to lead with, is this baseline recycling. At least for this next few months effort, we're trying to tackle that single stream recycling, or the baselines, right? The OCC, the aluminum cans, steel containers, paper, clean plastics. And then we can move into larger things. So maybe that's a more tiered approach as well.
We have a lot of homework.
Yeah, this is a lot of homework. So yeah, that is a lot of homework. But I think Patty offered to do some heavy lifting there with reaching out to the Recycling Partnership Group. I certainly will reach out to my colleagues in Republic if the waste management folks wanted to do the same, and the Keep America Beautiful folks. Anybody else want to?
I don't have the same contacts as you do, because I'm not necessarily in the waste management business. This is Alexia. So if Patty, if you want to send me a topic or a contact or something, or if you want, if anyone wants me to help do some like backup research, please just send.
Sounds good. I will definitely take you up on that.
Yeah. Okay. I think we can, if it's okay, let's touch real fast on the retract data management process. Who here is familiar with that? Is that kind of more of an industry thing?
So we, being NDP, went to we moved to retract to collect the data on waste diversion in Nevada, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do it again with them in next year. So there's some question with the contract. So I really don't know what is going to happen next year. And I know EPA was contracting with them for the state measurement program, and they recently moved to a different template. So I'm not sure what is happening with retract. I mean, they do help other states collect recycling data, and so I'm not the one involved in the contracts with them, so I really don't know what is happening, but I will try to find out before our next meeting. So they're basically just a company that started tracking and helping states or municipalities, or like they said, they were doing like a state measurement program with EPA, and so they know the industry, but I'm not sure what's going on with the company itself at this point. So and we were really hoping that it would be a long-term relationship, and 1 year does not really help, because now we're gonna have to, if it doesn't work, we're gonna have to figure out what to do next. But the only analytics I was able to get from them was a recycling rate, so I can calculate, I can look at by material or counties. I mean, we did pretty well with getting all the usual reporters, plus some people who weren't reporting, to report for 2020. And I think, the state recycling rate was still pretty flat, around 22 and maybe up to 23%. But, it wasn't, we still didn't meet 25.
Is that report something you could provide to us or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that we haven't finalized the numbers, just because there was some discrepancies between, like, they kind of mixed our state reporting with our agency reporting. So the numbers weren't quite, we had to do some monkeying around with that. So actually, that is one thing I'm supposed to be trying to figure out right now is, like, can we finalize the 2020 data? So that's on me. It's on Bree too, though. It's on us. Yeah, it's kind of on us to finalize that. So yes, we need to finalize 2020 for sure.
Yeah, it would definitely be wonderful to know. It's kind of hard to tackle this project without knowing what our data actually is from counties and materials and so forth. So that would be amazing if we could, get our arms around that in some fashion. So maybe we table this topic until we have more information about what's going to happen with the contract and that final report.
Okay, I have one last comment on that. Is that our diversion tonnage has gone up, but so has our waste generation, and it's a ratio of the two. So that's one thing that has been keeping us from meeting our goals, is that our waste generation keeps going up. But that's the waste reduction subgroup.
Right. Well, and I think, again, with better data management or data capture, we could change that parallel relationship between waste generation and diversion, right? In theory. So, other thoughts around the retrack program or data program? Okay, well, I'm going to suggest then that we figure out a time to meet for the next meeting, so we don't need to go through a poll. And then I'll send out these notes with the homework, and we can regroup and go from there. Would it be reasonable to meet not the week after Thanksgiving, but the week after that? That would be the week of Monday the 6th.
Don't forget, we also are going to have the full recycling group on December 6th, unless we want to change that.
No, I'd like to keep that, unless other people strongly disagree. Although we may not have a lot to talk about depending on how the subwork groups are going.
I haven't sent out the invite, so it's not finalized in any way.
Yeah, I was actually just looking at my calendar going, oh my gosh, I didn't save it on my calendar. What do people think about that? Should we use that time on Monday the 6th to regroup around this and then have a meeting later in the week or the week after with the whole group?
That sounds good.
That works for me. This is Wes.
I agree, Patty.
Thank you. Hearing no dissent. All right. What time works? Would the afternoon on the 6th work for everyone?
Yes, this is Wes. That works for now.
All right. How about 2 o'clock?
Ms. Mark, sounds good.
You got a lot of yeses in the chat as well.
Yes, ma'am. I'm just seeing those. Thank you. All right. So we will talk next on Monday, December 6th at 2 p.m. I'll shoot out these notes such as they are from this meeting. And Bree, if you wouldn't mind working on a repository document area, that'd be awesome. I did see that there were some emails coming in from folks. Apologies for my bad technology and slight disorganization today. I really appreciate y'all's time.